It is 12 p.m. on Tuesday, August 15th, 2023, and this is a Zoom public meeting for an emergency solutions grant application that New Hope Ministries is making as a regional application through DCED, the Department of Community and Economic Development. So we are beginning this meeting at this time. I am Molly Helmstetter. I'm the Director of Development at New Hope Ministries. This meeting is being recorded. It will be replayed and available for those who might be interested in learning about our application for ESG. I am joined by our Executive Director, Eric Saunders, and he is going to jump right into the second part of our agenda, which is a summary of the ESG application that New Hope Ministries will be submitting, and then from there we will have an opportunity for any comment or feedback, and then we will adjourn. So Eric, it's all yours.
Thank you, Molly, and greetings to everybody who's going to be joining us today and maybe viewing this recording later. We have some exciting news to be able to share with the communities that we support. New Hope has been a recognized provider of housing services for our 40 years of service to the Central Pennsylvania community. We are going to be applying for a new public funding opportunity through the Emergency Solutions Grant Program, and as Molly mentioned, the Department of Community and Economic Development. And one of our requirements to make an application is to be able to offer a public forum that we can receive input from our community and share information about our application and program. And so our earnest desire is that for anybody who has information or knowledge about the needs of the communities that we serve or the application process, and they would like us to hear their messaging, that you would please share that with us at any time, and we would be happy to receive it. For those of who will be listening and are somewhat familiar with New Hope, this may be redundant, but I think it's helpful to explain that we are a nonprofit human service agency. We were founded by local churches, but there's no requirement of faith participation to be able to receive services. We do, however, try to live out our mission of sharing the love of Christ by helping our neighbors in times of need and supporting their efforts towards stability. And so one way that we do that is that when folks come to us who have experienced a loss of housing or are in danger of eviction and losing housing, we don't want to be like the people in the Good Samaritan story who walk by and don't render help. So we have developed programs to assist folks to get caught up on rent and avoid the eviction process or mortgage payments. And we also have programs that are able to assist folks who are actually experiencing homeless to seek shelter through some referrals or hotel placement, but then to work with them to try to achieve permanent housing and support them to be able to maintain that housing over the long term. As most people know, we also offer nutrition assistance and help with other bills like heat and utilities and transportation needs. In addition, we also have some programs that benefit lower income youth, education and activity programs, as well as some really good employment programs. And I list this this kind of slate of programs that we offer because they're going to fall into the category of supportive services. And many of these are the supports that folks who are experiencing or facing homelessness are going to need to be able to maintain and obtain housing security. So what we have faced over the last couple of years is a pretty rapid increase in need of folks who have been unable to pay for the cost of their housing during the pandemic, as well as post-pandemic, people are feeling the effects of the cost of housing increasing significantly and the availability of affordable housing shrinking considerably. And so it's sort of a perfect storm of what there is expensive and there's not much to go around. So we made the decision that we needed to move into this space to be able to continue rendering aid to folks in need. And we've been blessed with generous community donations, certainly churches and individuals, businesses, local foundations, et cetera, partners like the United Way have given us resources to be able to share. Especially during the pandemic, there were stimulus funds that were available that assisted a lot of people, and we were a conduit of some public funds in addition to a lot of private funds to be able to assist the needs of our neighbors who were facing homelessness. The challenge that we're facing is that as need is increasing, those short-term funding options are disappearing, and we are going to be faced with a much lower base of operating support. So if I can share screen for a minute, I'd like to just kind of illustrate some of the things I'm talking to. And one of the things which I think is going to be relevant to the conversation about the Emergency Solutions Grant application is you can see a map of central Pennsylvania right now on your screen. And that would those blue boundaries are the service territory that New Hope is currently providing assistance to. The blue dots that you see are actually the locations of our physical service centers. You'll note that this includes territories of York County, of Cumberland County, and of Adams County. And the unique nature of our agency is that we have filled in the gaps between a number of county seats and established service providers in those counties. But there are a lot of folks who are living in those blue boundary communities, about 450,000 people, in fact, and they don't have access to many human service opportunities. And so our programs have been really the sole source of support. I'll note that the population area that we are currently serving represents about 50% of Adams County population, 50% of York County's population, and about 50% of Cumberland County's population. Switching over to another thing that would be helpful for folks to understand about our programs, and that is that we are, although traditionally funded by private funding sources, we've seen an increasing share of temporary public funds, and we feel like we are well positioned to be able to apply for and receive emergency solution grant funds, just because of the experience we've had over the last several years working with some public grants and grant reporting. We've also been involved in a coalition, it's called the Continuum of Care, in each of the counties where we serve, that administers public support and coordinates relief assistance to folks who are experiencing homelessness. So in York County, that is the York County Coalition on Homelessness, and in Adams and Cumberland County, that is the Eastern Continuum of Care. Those entities are also recipients of ESG funding, but the application that we're going to be making is as an independent organization. And as you can see on the screen that I'm sharing, the eligible applicants are local governments, nonprofit organizations, and New Hope is a nonprofit organization, and then some others. But so we are an eligible applicant for the ESG funding process. If somebody wants to learn more about the ESG funding program, they can go to dced.pa.gov and do a search for the Emergency Solutions Grant. But this is a stream of funding that comes from Housing Urban Development, which is a federal funding process, and is awarded to the state of Pennsylvania, who then subgrants that to various entities. We're hoping New Hope Ministries will be one, and it allows these federal funds to be used for housing needs in some specific areas. And you can see these bullet points on the screen that include rapid rehousing, street outreach, homeless prevention, emergency shelter, homeless management information systems. That's a unified database that allows people to be qualified for assistance, as well as to be able to record services, and is visible by participating organizations, as well as administrative costs.
Eric,
Yes.
I'm so sorry to interrupt, but we are only still seeing the map on our end.
You're only seeing the map on your end. Thank you
Yes, so
for that clarification. I'm going to stop share, and I'll reshare again and see if I can get that to come up. All right, did that do the job?
yes, now we can see the DCED website. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. So you can see at the top the website, dced.pa.gov. It's the Emergency Solutions Grant page, and the bullet points are the ones that I was just reading from. New Hope Ministries, in our multi-county application for ESG assistance, is going to be applying under the categories of homeless prevention, homeless management information system, that's the database I referred to, as well as administration cost. So even though those other categories are worthy opportunities, they are not areas that we are going to be applying for at this time, maybe at some point in the future. So the way the grant will work is that we will be applying in the next week, and having that application considered by DCED in the state of Pennsylvania, and we hope to be awarded later this year, and be able to use those funds to expand operations in some areas that I'll share. One of the requirements of the ESG program is that it's a matching grant. And the last thing that I would want stakeholders to think at New Hope is that we are no longer in need of public support. What this grant opportunity does is it actually extends the funds that we're able to receive through community funding sources, and parlay them to be able to double the funding opportunity. So that's something that is really appealing at a time where we're seeing diminished support for housing programs, that we can kind of recoup some of those lost funds and continue the work that's incredibly important now. So that's a quick overview of the ESG program, and certainly would invite questions that people have about that and how it's likely to impact the services that we provide. But as I mentioned, we're going to be using funds for homeless prevention. And what that's going to look like is that when somebody has, through maybe job loss or illness or even, poor choices, that can be a factor sometimes, but they've gotten to the point where they have fallen behind on being able to pay for housing, and they're going to be facing eviction or foreclosure, is that we can step in and work alongside them to be able to maintain that housing or help them relocate to find more suitable housing that might be more affordable for their budget situation. And so it really comes down as homeless prevention, but that covers a lot of areas. It can be rental payment, it can include skills training, it can include housing search, certainly ongoing supportive services to be able to help people maintain that and to make right choices that are going to be responsible and contribute. The reasons for not going for some of those other categories is they just, as important as those rapid rehousing dollars are, they require a level of investment that we don't believe that we're going to be able to make. The need is really high right now. I'm gonna switch and just show some quick examples of services. Just in the last 3 months, you can see under our categories of housing services, we are providing emergency shelter assistance, we're providing mortgage assistance, and we're providing rental assistance. And so 112 households were helped through our New Hope programs in the last 3 months. We would expect that number is probably going to be close to between 500 for the previous year. And one of the main reasons why that number isn't bigger than it is actually because of limited resources. And so having additional resources are actually going to help us be able to extend help to the communities that we serve. I want to as well point out one of the bedrock principles of the Emergency Solutions Grant Program and the federal funding opportunities that we're hoping to apply for. And that is a philosophy that kind of undergirds all of the housing assistance programs, and it's called Housing First. And as I share this one, you can see that there's a nice diagram here that lays out what Housing First means. But there's, sometimes you see 7 principles, 5 principles, 9 principles, but this is a good kind of introduction for folks who might not be familiar with Housing First. In the old way of approaching homelessness and housing, most people would start, who present as homelessness with being referred for emergency shelter assistance. So it might be, sleeping on a mat in a community hall while folks try to sort out their needs. And then they would have to receive certain services and, through positive behavior qualify for other services, and then maybe move to transitional housing, and then finally be able to qualify for permanent housing. And for some folks, that is a valid approach, and there is a need for those more traditional structured shelter programs. But for a lot of folks, the best cure for homelessness is providing them housing, that they've got enough internal stability. They will do better in their own private housing, than if they're left in a homeless situation or forced into a shelter system, which can be chaotic and stressful for them. And so the principle number 1 is immediate access to permanent housing with no housing readiness requirements. And that's kind of, it's more accepted now, but when it came out, it was a radical, idea that if people are housed, they are immediately going to be able to have a better opportunity to address their mental health needs, their substance abuse needs, their employment needs, et cetera, to be able to maintain their housing status. That the longer that you leave people unhoused, the harder it is for them to be able to achieve stability. The second principle, and this is one, I think folks can understand if they would put themselves in the position of somebody who is in a financial crisis and a housing crisis. And it's the idea of, we don't tell homeless people what's best for them. They get to choose what works for them. And that means everything from the housing that they're going to live in to what goals they want to work on. And that can even include, they don't want to work on their mental health or their substance abuse issues at this time. And that's a really challenging principle, but the evidence has shown pretty conclusively that people do better with mental health and do better with substance abuse and do better with, life problems when they actually have housing security. And so, it leads into principle number 3, which is sort of a harm reduction approach, that you can, you don't have to be sober. You don't have to be stable to be housed. There's plenty of folks who, are struggling with substance abuse who also have housing. There are a lot of people who deal with mental health issues, but they also have housing. And so we're not going to set a high bar for people to become housed. We're actually going to try to provide people with a pathway. Obviously, we think that substance abuse treatment for those who need it is critically important. And we think that mental health treatment for those who need it, or other types of services, whether it would be employment or, financial counseling, et cetera, are going to help people maintain a stable lifestyle over time. but they need to choose to participate in it, not to be forced to participate in it. And that can mean that through self-determination, they have the right not to participate. Principle number 4, individualized and participant-driven supports, really means coming along somebody, allowing them to set goals, providing support that they need when they're ready to accept it to be able to achieve their permanent goals. And then finally, social and community inclusion. We're not putting people in a place to live by themselves with no without being part of a community. And so we all know that none of us live in a vacuum. None of us are islands. That if people are going to be truly successful, they ought to have church, and they ought to have employment, and they ought to have community, and they ought to have family support that is going to help them maintain a healthy lifestyle. And so I bring all this up, and certainly folks can read a lot more or ask us for more information about Housing First, but we're committing as an organization that we're going to be guided by Housing First principles as we provide services in areas of housing provision for folks in need. So I've covered Housing First, and I've covered a little bit about the ESG program. I've described the types of funding that we're hoping to achieve. One of the things that I haven't covered, and I really want to, and that is that we are applying for a $250,000 state grant as a multi-county service provider. And, when I started doing this work, I would have said $250,000, that's a huge amount of money, and you could do anything with that. In point of fact, if it takes $3,000 per family, and I think that's a low estimate, to help them become housed, that $250,000 of additional funding barely represents 100 households. Our work has already begun in this area, and one of our latest reports is that Cumberland County alone is experiencing about 200 evictions per year, per week, 200 evictions per week. So if we're able through this grant to help 100 more households to be able to maintain their housing or find new affordable housing that'll be permanent for them, we're still not going to be meeting all of the needs that exist in our community. But I think about the power of being able to provide help to an additional 100 households. And if we have the opportunity to do it, we absolutely need to. We had an interesting situation recently where we learned about some folks who were living in a campground. When I say folks, about 30 households who were experiencing eviction because of some zoning issues. And so suddenly we had a huge number of families who were already not super stable in their housing, who were now having to find new housing. The location was actually in Cumberland County. It was a mailing address that was an Adams County address. And some of the folks, the only places they could find to park their campers were in York County. And so when you live along the county margins, the county borders, where you receive help, where you live, where you work, they may all be in separate counties. And so traditional housing streams are pretty limited to helping people who are residents of one particular county. Again, not that there's not a need for those, and not that we don't want to take advantage of those whenever it makes sense, but having a grant like an ESG grant that will allow us to provide services across county boundaries and to be able to get folks the help that they need. And I think this is important, for the service providers that we depend upon as partners, to be able to not take away funding from existing programs that are already pretty significantly stretched in being able to provide services and not meeting all the needs. This is an opportunity to bring federal and state resources into York County and Adams County and Cumberland County, and to be able to extend additional help to folks who are in need. And so that's really why, a combination of factors, we felt this was the year for us to attempt an application like this. And we've been very encouraged by all the folks who have advised us and guided us. and are looking forward to getting our application submitted, certainly with the input of the community as we do so, and for a positive decision on the part of state government. Those are some of the highlights of our ESG application. And I'm going to turn things back over to Molly for discussion and wrap up.
Thanks, Eric. I appreciate that. And the summary that you provided about our ESG application, what it will be used for, and the outcomes that we hope to achieve. At this time, I do not see any questions in the chat. We did not receive any commentary or feedback in advance of this call, of this public meeting. At this point, I would suggest that if anyone is listening to this ahead of the August 18th deadline, and you have any questions or would like to offer feedback or commentary, to please call me directly at 717-432-2087, extension 203. Please do that by Thursday, August 17th. That would be most helpful, as we have to submit our application, like I said, on this Friday, August 18th. Is there anything else, Eric, that you would like to add before we adjourn?
The only thing I could say is, for those who might be watching this and encounter somebody who's experiencing potential for eviction or housing insecurity, please refer them to New Hope Ministries. If we're not the right place to get them help, we will make sure that we direct them to an entity that can render assistance. We're just grateful for the community's continuing support, because we cannot do this work without your help.
Well said. Thank you so much. Again, we will end this meeting. It is now 12:27 p.m. and thank you for listening, attending, and appreciate your support.